welcome to another edition of the Office Visit with Dr. Tom Pritchard. I'm your host, Matt McCormick, alongside Dr. Tom. Season 2 is off with a bang, is it not?
I think Season 2 is much better so far than Season 1. That's my humble opinion.
We've talked about some great subjects, most recently Roddy Piper. We've had a very entertaining, spirited discussion about Hot Rod, and today we're going to move on to some other interesting characters, the fabulous Freebirds. Let's just do this. When you hear Freebirds, what comes up?
Well, of course, Leonard Skinner. But I mean, Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts, three of the greatest performers in professional wrestling, and that transcends any era, in my opinion. The fabulous Freebirds were the ones who get the credit, I guess, for modern day wrestling, bringing music into the arena. But you know, they obviously weren't the first, because it had been done years before with Gorgeous George and other people. But the Freebirds were the ones who actually got the ball rolling again in the 80s, and they were instrumental in a lot of innovations in professional wrestling during that time. So when I hear the word Freebirds, Michael Hayes is the first one that comes to mind.
Right.
But of course, you can't discount what Buddy Roberts and Bam Bam Terry Gordy did to make that trio, that threesome, so impactful in professional wrestling.
So breaking it down individually, Michael Hayes, I would say, is the more well-known, and he's enjoyed a little bit more longevity than others. But starting with Buddy Roberts, talk about Buddy Roberts first.
Buddy Roberts had a career as Dale
Valentine.
Well, he did wrestle as Dale Valentine. Prior to that, he was Buddy Roberts with the Hollywood Blondes with Jerry Brown. Thank you very much, Tom, for remembering that. Jerry Brown and Buddy Roberts were known as the Hollywood Blondes in the 70s. Had a pretty good, successful career. But then Buddy kind of ventured off and found his way to Texas. And this was after Johnny Valentine had a plane crash, and became known as Johnny's younger brother, Dale Valentine, and had a fairly successful career in the mid-70s to there, but then he just bounced around from territory to territory as a journeyman, so to speak. And when the Freebirds came, Michael and Terry came to Louisiana after a short stint in Mississippi and the Gulf Coast of Alabama and Pensacola, things like that. Bill Watts decided that they needed a workhorse on the team because Terry was obviously the big man and didn't need to be bumping all over the place, and Michael was a mouthpiece and wasn't the greatest worker in the ring, but man, could he talk. And Buddy was more or less the guy when they needed to bump somebody or get something done. He was the guy they went to, more or less the utility man of the Freebirds. So he wound up in a pretty good spot, and of course, I believe in the beginning, Michael and Terry didn't necessarily want Buddy along, but they found out that Buddy was one of them, or let me say this: the Freebirds found out that they belonged in Buddy's camp, more so because Buddy Roberts was certainly one of the more colorful characters in the business, along with Michael and Terry.
At one point, named the nickname by Jack Roberts, alluding to the fact that he enjoyed.
He might have enjoyed a libation or 20 here and there on a nightly basis. Yeah. I don't think.
That's really where the Jack came from, though, right?
That is it. Yes. It had nothing to do with Billy Jack. It had nothing to do with martial arts. I think it had to do with having a few after the matches, or maybe even before. Who knows?
So let's talk about Terry Gordy.
Well, Terry Gordy, for his time, especially during that time in the business, during the 80s, was known as the best big man. I believe Terry started when he was like 14 years old. Yeah, I mean, had to wrestle under a mask.
Yep.
And showed up. He had this incredible freakish size. He was such a natural in the ring. And when he came into his own, when he was like, I guess he came to Louisiana, he was maybe 17 or 18 years old, and he was already a seasoned vet.
Right.
Could work with anybody, knew how to make even the smallest guy look credible when he wanted to. But Terry also knew how to get over as a big man. and one of the nicest, easygoing country boy from Saudi Daisy, Tennessee, right outside of Chattanooga, and just loved life, loved the business, and loved doing what he was doing, and he was great at it. So, I mean, Terry, as, gosh, close to 280, 300 pounds, could move like a cruiserweight.
A lot of big guys modeled themselves after Terry.
Yeah, especially if you had that body type, that body style, and if you could move like Terry Gordy, you were a valuable commodity in the business.
So let's get to Michael Hayes. Obviously, a little bit more well known, or you know what I mean. A little bit more of a household name than the other two.
Well, let me just
Michael P.S.
Michael P.S. I love Michael P.S. Hayes. I have an affection and a special place in my heart for Michael Purely Sexy Hayes, just because what you see is what you get with Michael Hayes. You cannot, well, let me say this, Michael cannot make up a character. Michael lives the gimmick, if you will, 24/7. Michael Hayes is Michael Hayes every day, every minute of the day.
Right.
He is what you see. But he's a creative guy. He is one of the most creative people I've ever known. And some people don't necessarily care for Michael, and I can understand why. But that's what you have in this business, and that's what makes Michael so special. That's what's made Michael so special all these years, and that's why he is still one of the top trusted people in WWE, because he knows, he has a feeling for what the crowd wants. He has a feeling for what's going to get over. He has a feeling and a knack for where to lead storylines and where to take people and how to develop talent. So Michael Hayes, from the time I've known Michael, which was, again, in Louisiana, I had my third match against Michael and Terry in a tag match. I don't remember my partner, I just remember I got beat. But Michael was always nice, always gracious, but very creative, and lived the Freebird rock and roll. Ain't no gimmick.
Right.
It's real, man.
Who was responsible for putting Michael and Terry together first?
I believe it was Michael and Terry, because they were both, Michael and Terry were both wrestling in Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken, for George Calkin, a promoter who had broke away from the Watts territory. And Michael had a disagreement with George, and this is my recollection of the story.
Right.
I could be wrong.
Right. Don't let that get away.
No, let's not let that get away this good story. But Michael left, and Terry followed Michael out of the building. Says, "You know where you're going?" Michael says, "No, but where am I going? I'm going to be somebody." And Terry said, "Well, I'm going with you." He says, "I know you'll make it on your own. I'll make it on my own, but I think we'll make it faster together." So my first TV taping in Louisiana this day, driving all night from Houston after the show, got to New Orleans about 7 in the morning, and as I go into the studio, Michael and Terry are already in the studio cutting promos. At least Michael's cutting a promo,
Right.
rapping, rolling off his tongue. Just, he was a pro, and Michael's only 20 years old as well. But Michael had that look. Terry, they both had the robes and vest, and looked like a tag team. So they both got together from knowing each other from the Mississippi territory, and the Freebirds were born.
Okay. So how long were they on their own before Buddy Jack comes along?
Oh my gosh, maybe I want to say maybe 4 years. I don't know exactly what year Buddy came into play. Maybe 3.
And where was it that Buddy was first introduced?
It was in Louisiana with Bill Watts. Bill Watts was the man who said, "This is going to be your guy. We can't bump Terry all the time. We can't beat Terry, and Michael, we don't necessarily want to beat him either, but Michael is a better mouthpiece. He is the mouthpiece of the Freebirds, so we need a guy who can bump, who can do a job and not get hurt, stay credible," and Buddy was the guy. So I believe maybe 4 or 5 years. It could be less. Any Freebird authentication or any Freebird experts out there can let us know.
Okay, so how about the Freebirds in world class? They're obviously they had a well-publicized feud with the Von Erichs there. What made them so successful there?
Well, once again, Gary Hart was going back and forth from Dallas to Atlanta, and always liked Michael Hayes, from what I understand, and told Michael he would love to have him come into Dallas if they were ever interested. Well, I believe it was Michael who made a shot to the Reunion Arena show and saw how the Von Erichs were over and saw the crowd at Reunion Arena and felt the buzz and felt the vibe. And knew there was something going on, and that's when he called Terry and said, we need to make a move. And I think they left Georgia and went to Dallas. And they came in as allies of Von Erichs at first. They were friends.
Right.
And that's how, because it's always better when you turn on somebody. But that's, I think it was a case of Michael going and seeing the reaction the Von Erichs were getting, seeing what was going on in Dallas, to where he called Terry and said, we need to go now because this thing is hot.
Right.
And it was all Michael Hayes' idea to slam the door on Terry Von Erich on I think it was Christmas night, whatever, the big Christmas show in the Sportatorium.
Right.
The reaction, you just watch that back and see the reaction.
Use that as a segue, just real quick, into just how over the Von Erichs were and what they meant, what that family meant to wrestling in Texas.
Well, you have to go back to the time, have to go back to the era, and realize that in the early 80s, they had just got done with the wrestling of the 70s, and the young generation was coming over, and a new wave was happening. Fritz Von Erich had been a star in Texas for years. Fritz had been a star everywhere he went. Now all of a sudden he has these three good-looking young sons, David, Kevin, Kerry, coming on the scene, and the people had watched these kids literally grow up before their eyes, selling programs, selling concessions, knowing the Fritz's sons. So as they start wrestling, and these young kids are now beating the stars from the 70s, and you're looking for new stars to bring in, well, no matter who you put against the Von Erichs, it was an instant attraction. It was an instant buzz because these young kids were out there doing new things, and it was a youth movement. And it wasn't these old, fat, pot-bellied guys in the past who were inventors. Back in the old days, prior to this, the rule was you had to be in the business at least 5 years before you could even be in the main event, or be considered for the main event. So you were in your 40s. Freddie Blassie was 4 years old when he first became a main eventer. So it was more of the older guys. And now the young guys were taking over. And whether they were ready or not, because they were Von Erichs, they were getting pushed to the main event. So you had a perfect combination. You had 3 Von Erichs and 3 Freebirds. It just made perfect sense to come in, and boy, now they're all friends. And when it means the most, it counts the most, cares about to win the world championship, fair play takes over. Man, I can't beat the guy like this. Man, I'm just good old American milk and cookies. And gosh, Michael, I just can't do it. Well, that no-good bastard. It made perfect sense to show the Freebirds' true colors and those daggum Georgia Bulldogs, sons of Freebirds, if you will. The Von Erichs were like gods. They were rock stars everywhere they went. Yeah. It was so incredibly huge because they were the sons of Texas, young, vibrant, exciting. And those bastard Freebirds screwed them.
Talk about the business that they did together, though. Huge houses, right?
Well, once the fate was sealed, where Terry slammed the door on Kerry's head. Kerry wrestling Ric Flair, right. Michael Hayes, his good friend, his special guest referee in the Sportatorium. And for anyone, the majority of people out there who have never seen or been in the Sportatorium, it was a church. It was a place where you went, and it was holy ground. In reality, it was a barn, and it had no air conditioning or heat. At least during when it rained, it was terrible. It was a horrible looking building. It was just had that ambience, had that feel. On TV, it looked like this this great mecca or this
Right.
mythical building, and it was. But at the same time, you had wooden bleachers, and my God. But the people came, and I think maybe capacity was 6,000 people, whatever it was. But on this night, Terry had Flair in position. I think Michael was the one who nailed Flair, pushed Flair, whatever it was. Flair was down for the pin. And
Right.
Kerry wouldn't take the cover, wouldn't go out of the cage, whatever it was. And Michael got a little shoving match. And as Kerry's going to walk out the cage, finally, Terry slammed the door on Kerry's head, and the building went silent. It was that silent heat where shock, and then all of a sudden you feel this thing. Even watching, not being there live, but even watching it back and realizing that these two friends of the Von Erichs just screwed him in the biggest match of his career. So they wanted to kill the Freebirds,
Right.
but they did such great business afterwards. Everywhere they went, it was that incredible professional wrestling heat, not sports entertainment heat.
Right.
It was real heat that Michael and Terry got wherever they went. I mean, not just with Freebirds, but there's a story about working with Junkyard Dog in New Orleans at the New Orleans Coliseum after blinding the dog with the Freebird hair cream. And Dog's wife was just about to give birth to their first baby, and he'd never be able to see his baby, and all these tragic things. And going to the ring in New Orleans, they caught a guy with a gun who was going to shoot Michael. Yeah, so that was real heat that those guys had, because Michael is Michael, and Terry was the silent but deadly guy, and Buddy was the guy that would surprise you with a knockout punch. But I don't think you were going to get past Terry. If you did, then you weren't going to get past Buddy, and if you did, you got past Terry and Buddy, Michael was in a world of trouble.
I just, to put that in context today, I can't imagine somebody coming to the Staples Center in Los Angeles with a gun wanting to kill Triple H.
Well, that is the difference, because in those days, you took great pains, and a lot of us took great pains to protect the business. And when you looked at Michael Hayes, who was a pretty big guy, Terry Gordy was even bigger than Michael, and then Buddy, who was not a small guy himself, they were three badasses, and they carried themselves as badasses.
Right.
Now, Michael gets a bad rap because they say, oh, he wasn't that tough, and he was just a mouthpiece. Well, I've never seen Michael fight, but I think when it comes to the point of someone's threatening your life, you're going to do what you have to do. And they portrayed, they weren't playing a part. They were the Freebirds. They were those crazy, wild guys. On a road trip with Michael, Michael's driving, and you do dip. Back then, I've never dipped, but Michael was dipping and had a cup, but he decided to spit out the window. Well, he spit, but the window was up. And he spit on the window. Well, he just looked and he licked it off the window.
No.
Yeah. And they would do things like spit in each other's mouth. And there's other things in the dressing room they would do that you would just say, what? Really?
Dip in each other's mouth or just
whatever they had. But it was done more for shock value, I believe, because they knew the boys would go, what? And that's what they were looking for, because they had to be crazier, faster, wilder than everybody else. And that was during a time when you had some pretty crazy, fast, and wild guys. So, but riding with the Freebirds and being around the Freebirds, it was never a dull moment. Another time we went into a bar, and we're going to order, but Michael, being Michael, had to get up and headbutt the light hanging over the table that we were at. Just headbutt it. For what reason? God only knows. But immediately, the manager, it wasn't a bouncer, it was the manager who says, you guys got to leave now. Michael backed off, tried to say, I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean it, I'm sorry. Well, no, we had to leave.
Just headbutted the light.
Just headbutted the light.
Did it break?
No, he just headbutted it. It was the lamp hanging over the table. I don't know if it was a Bennigan's or an Applebee's, wherever it was, but it was frowned upon. And of course, you had this long-haired, crazy, wild-eyed fellow, and then you had Terry, and my buddy wasn't with him this night. But be that as it may, man, the Freebirds attracted attention wherever they went. Michael didn't mind the attention. In fact, he relished, he loved the attention.
I know the Von Erichs were rock stars, and I knew they already were over and had a foothold there, but do you think the Freebirds had a role in pushing them even higher?
Without the Freebirds, the Von Erichs never would have reached what they got, because you had to have the antagonists and you had the heroes, but you need a villain, man. You have to have somebody to work with, and the Freebirds were the perfect fit. Again, you had 3 Von Erichs, 3 Freebirds. Why not? But without the Freebirds, the Von Erichs might have been stars, but I doubt, we can never know, but
right.
I doubt that they would have been as big as they became, by all means.
So you talked about them in Georgia. Pretty good run there as well, right?
Yeah. In Georgia with Terry first, and then when Michael came back, it was with Jimmy Jam Garvin.
Jimmy Jam.
Yes.
Talk about him for just a moment, because we skipped him earlier.
Jimmy?
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy Jam Garvin, I believe, became part of the Freebirds. You know, real quick, not to veer off too much, but I met Jimmy Garvin and Brian Blair when I went to Oklahoma doing TVs. You know, I started in October '79. Between that span, October, November, December, I was doing TVs and shots around the Southeast, you know, from Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So I met different guys in different territories, and this was right at the time when Louisiana and Oklahoma and Arkansas had split territories. They were one, but now they're 2. So Boyd Pierce had got me booked in different areas, and Gary Hart also got me booked in some of these places. So I met Jimmy Garvin and Brian Blair in Oklahoma. I think it was the Tulsa Fairgrounds for TV, and so we met, and I had my match, and then that night I went somewhere for a house show and drove Herb Calvert. You know Herb?
I don't.
Right. Well, Herb he was a football player very around Oklahoma, and one of those guys who I remember him riding with me that night, and we talked. Nice guy. He passed away, I think, 5 years after that. But very nice guy. We went to a house show, and I'm in the dressing room. That's when we had the heels and baby faces separated, and I hear Jimmy Garvin say to Brian Blair, "Hey, Brian, is tonight that one boot battle royal?" And Brian goes, "Oh, yeah, damn, it sure is." And that's it. I didn't say anything. I'm just getting dressed and laying around. And Brian came over and says, "Hey, we have a one boot battle royal tonight." I said, "Okay." He says, "Yeah, everybody has to take off their right boot because Okishikina has a loaded boot, and you know, to rectify it, he didn't say rectify it, so to make it fair, I guess is what it was. Everybody's gonna, Oki has to take off his right boot, and we're gonna have a battle royal." So I thought, something didn't sound right, but the referee actually came to me and says, "Listen, man, if I were you, I'd go ahead and take off the boot because otherwise you'll never hear the end of it, and they will get you." Okay. So I took off the boot, and everybody goes out to the battle royal, and I come hobbling out. I'm looking, everybody's got their boots on, and I see Okishikina, and Okishikina wrestled barefoot anyway. And so I got in the ring, and Skandar Akbar grabbed me and says, "Are they messing with you, son?" I said, "Yes, sir." So "Would you get me out here?" He goes, "No problem, come here with me." He threw me over the top rope. But, Jimmy Garvin and Brian Blair, they never forgot that. And Jimmy was a little more one of those crazy guys, too. Didn't mind doing anything. And I think he endeared himself to Michael and Terry.
Fit right in.
Yeah, fit right in, man. So Jimmy Jam was definitely crazy.
So when you get to the back and when Brian Blair and Jimmy Garvin,
they just laughed. They just laughed. That's all they did. Didn't say anything. But
I wonder how many other people have fell victim to the.
No, but well, I'm sure they did. But that's something that 35 years later, Brian Blair will always bring up. The last time I saw him, he brought that up, and he never forgot. That's awesome.
What are some of the more memorable matches or teams that they worked with in Georgia?
Of course, the Road Warriors, I believe, and
how did those matches go?
That's
pretty
yeah.
opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I don't think the Warriors had that big of an issue necessarily, because if Michael started dancing, they could shut him down. And Terry was always a businessman, so I don't really think they had that much of an issue.
But the quality of the matches.
I, well, I don't think we're going to talk quality here, but I
Right.
think we're just going to talk. It's the attraction of seeing the Freebirds against the Road Warriors. I think the Freebirds were that team that you when they made their entrance, man, and they got in the ring, they had that dazzle, they had that showmanship, they had that spectacular look. They always had the best looking robes and trunks, and they looked like somebody. They looked like stars. Michael always presented himself as a star, and that's the key. Why he's where he is today, because he knows what a star is supposed to look like. He knows how a star is supposed to be. And I hate the word. I don't want to use the word act, but react as a star. And whoever they stepped in the ring with, whether it was with the Midnight Express, they worked with the Rock and Roll Express later on, of course. They weren't always great matches, but they were an attraction, and it was something you wanted to have on your card because the fans would always wonder what's going to happen.
Right. Who else in Georgia besides the Road Warriors?
Let's see. I think, of course, the Four Horsemen. I don't think their run was that long. You're talking about the early days of Georgia
Georgia
wrestling. Man, I can't. Honest to goodness, that's one of those things here on the office visit that I'll have to check my phone.
We'll Google it later.
Yeah, let's Google it. Yeah. Google never lets you down.
They had a brief run in WWF. I don't know if you call it a run. 1984, an alleged altercation with Andre the Giant because they arrived late to a town. Can you imagine? Can you see Andre being upset about the Freebirds strolling in a little late?
Well, once again, that was in the 80s, and that was during a time when the business was still considered a little bit of an outlaw, Wild West type business to be in. And most of the guys who were in the business, the majority of the guys who were in the business back then, were living like the Wild West, man. You only had to be in the building about an hour beforehand, and in the territories, you didn't have to show up. As long as you showed up an hour before the show started, you were fine. But in WWF at that time, it was a different organization. They wanted you there. I'm not sure if it was 4 hours or whatever the show called for. I mean, when you got there, you were expected to be there. I'm sure at least a minimum. I don't want to say that it was a set time, but I'm sure it was a minimum of an hour. And Michael and Terry and Buddy probably got a little carried away because Michael was, I'm pretty sure, expecting to become a rock star. Michael, listen, man, Michael, for what people say, he may not be the greatest vocalist, but I always thought Michael looked like a rock star. Always carried himself out.
Well, and he had a run in the Monday Night Raw band. So
yeah. Well, anyway, be that as it may, Michael and Terry and Buddy probably showed up after the second match finished or whatever. They figured they're going to be on later, and Andre being Andre, probably took exception to some of their antics backstage because Michael has never been known to be quiet about a lot of things, and that could have rubbed Andre wrong, because I'm going to go ahead and tell a story here on the office visit that may or may not get me in trouble. How about that?
Outstanding.
I believe it was Augusta, Georgia. Harley Race, as the NWA World Champion, was defending his championship that night. And Michael and Terry may or may not, because I was not there, have been pissing all over the dressing room, trying to piss on each other, and yes, I know. But Harley said, with his cigarette, if one drop of piss is on my back, I'm beating the shit out of both of you. And needless to say, the pissing stopped. So, but that's the kind of,
Trying to piss on each other.
but again, because I think they knew the reaction would be, what are they doing? And look, not, you know, some of those folklore stories you could say, yeah, no. I've seen bits and pieces. I wasn't there for that one, but I was there for others.
Have you seen them try to urinate on each other?
Yes, yes, I have.
All right.
Yes, go ahead and mark that down. But once again, it was during a time where you did outrageous stuff. And you did outrageous stuff because it was an outrageous time, and you had outrageous things that made you do outrageous stuff. And it got people talking about you. In fact, we're talking about it still. You know, so, or I'm not talking about it.
I'll talk about it again.
I'm sure you will. But that was what it was back then, and that's what made the Freebirds so larger than life and colorful. But don't get me wrong, they also could be very, very gracious, very charming.
Right.
Michael would be a very, very charming guy, and he is. You know, so, but it was a crazy, crazy time. Crazy, crazy people. Crazy, crazy business.
We talked about their entrance music earlier and how that just really just added to the effect of the Freebirds. Did Michael write the later on when they used Bad Street? Did he write that?
Yeah, Michael wrote that. Michael Hayes wrote Bad Street. Well, and actually, you know, we were talking earlier about Michael making sure I got to my wedding. In the flying in from Charlotte, flights were canceled, driving from Charlotte to Knoxville. Well, that night, after I got married, we had some champagne, but I had the Bad Street cassette, and we put the Bad Street cassette. I swear to God, man, at my wedding, we played that at my wedding. Michael, I mean, because I like Michael.
Yeah.
I know Michael probably can't sing for anybody else's taste, but to me, it was great.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was cool. You know, and Michael, I think Michael's a great entertainer. I think Michael's a great musician or magician. But, you know, we played that, and everybody's looking at me like, what are we doing? So, he's right here. So, but I loved it, man. And Michael is,
How's your wife like?
she dug it, man. She loves Michael too. She's experienced Michael. Let me say that. And it's been great. We've had dinner with Michael and his wife before on a couple of occasions, and it never ends with Michael. That's what I love about it. It's always an experience.
What kind of a personal relationship did you have with Terry Gordy?
Fairly decent. I mean, it was more of an acquaintance deal, but again, and just knowing Terry from the building and making a couple trips with him, it was that kind of relationship. I have more of a relationship with Michael because I worked with him later on, but Terry was just a big kid and just a big, happy-go-lucky kid who was in a business he loved, got to do it he loved, and had fun doing it, and he made money, and he was probably the greatest big man at that time, and could move, and be entertaining, right, at the same time, incredible.
And I think something else about Terry that's always been interesting or stuck out to me. Terry had his issues, of course, as well as a lot of guys have. But I think it was on an airplane they actually had overdosed. Coming home from Japan or going to?
Going to Japan, I believe it was. He had a reaction to whatever it was, and it was in a coma for maybe 3 weeks.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. Though, it comes out of the coma, still works after that. And I knew guys that worked with him that said, you know, to sit and talk to him wasn't exactly the same, but in the ring, well, it was still there.
I saw Terry, maybe it was, a couple of years after he had finished with Japan. It came to WWF at that time. and worked as an executioner and had a run with the Undertaker. He wasn't the same Terry Gordy that we knew and loved, but watching him in the ring, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't the same Terry Gordy. You know, it's something that a lot of people, let me say it this way, some people don't understand what goes into having a match, especially the guy of the caliber of the Undertaker. You don't necessarily have to know every part of the match, but if you just follow it, I don't know that Terry was as good as following
right
at that time. So little things like that, and we were trying to watch him as well and protect him from the issues and things that could fall into his lap.
Right.
So to say. We were trying to watch out for that.
And I believe Percy or Paul Barrett was managing at the time as the executioner. So did he kind of play a role in taking care of him in that aspect?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe, you know, it was a known fact that when he came in, everyone was made aware to try and not let these.
Did any one person play a role in getting him there at that time?
I'm sure Michael had a huge part in giving him an opportunity to come and make sure that he got a chance.
Right.
You know, and Michael was one who came to me and just said, if you wouldn't mind, watch out for Terry to make sure that he doesn't get hurt.
Right.
But it wasn't the only one. There was other people he asked to do as well. We were all watching out. So, you know, you have these things over here calling your name, and you're trying to say, no, let's go over here. Right. So, once again, I mean, he had an opportunity, and but it just wasn't the same.
Right. What about your relationship with Buddy Roberts?
Buddy, I knew didn't have that big of a relationship with. Again, it was more or less at the building and seeing him when he was working, but nothing really, nothing like a Michael or anything like that. But Buddy was always a great guy. He was one of the boys, and at that time, being one of the boys meant you understood the code, you understood what you're doing, and that was it.
How about the Freebird rule that's known today?
Well, that again, the innovative part of Michael Hayes and understanding that we have three guys, so if we win the titles, that means we can make any one of us. No way, Freebird rule, Freebird. Who would have thought that they would still be alive? You know,
they call that the Freebird rule.
Exactly. So I mean that they made their mark, and that's a very, very cool thing. You know, we have three guys, two guys win the title. You can interject any member of that team and just mix it up, and that way your opponents can't scout you. So I mean that's the idea, and it worked perfect.
And we've talked a little bit about Michael's longevity. He's still there today. He's still in WWE today. Is he right now?
My understanding, Michael is an executive producer. He's a head writer for now, Derek, could be wrong, but this is my understanding. He's the head writer for SmackDown at this time. But he has huge input on Raw, huge input on pay-per-views, huge input on the main matches. He's been a mentor to a lot of the younger producers and some of the younger producers. And he has, I really have to believe he has unlimited creativity and unlimited ideas. He knows how to look at something, and this is something I was able to do. When I was in Stanford and was doing voiceovers, was on the creative team, was training people, had an office in talent relations, I would go with Michael. Michael would fly in from Atlanta. Michael was only home maybe, and maybe even less now. He was only home maybe 2 days a week back in the 90s. And when we would go have dinner and then go back to his room to write, he just had this stream of consciousness, this stream of, this is what we should do, this is what they should do, this is what they're going to wind up at. And 6 months down the road, he had the card already laid out. He could lay this out. And then presenting it in the meeting, he would pitch his ideas, and Vince or whoever it might be might shoot something down, and he would have a backup immediately ready to go. And you would always come back to that idea, and he would just pitch the same idea in a different way. That's talent to me, because I don't remember what pay-per-view it was, but Michael came in and just said, this doesn't feel like a big show to me. This doesn't feel like a pay-per-view. What if we did this, and I can't remember the exact matches. I just remember the format that he had. I just remember how he went about presenting it. And I thought, you know, he came in and changed the entire card that this team had put together. He changed it because he pitched why, he pitched how, and he pitched where it's going to end up. Well, nobody else did that, and the powers that be liked it, and they changed the entire show around Michael's ideas. And I'm sure that happens today because Michael's still there. He's not the most politically correct guy at times, and he can say things that will infuriate and piss you off to no end. But you know, that's what makes Michael Michael.
How do you feel about the Doc Hendricks days? You ever say anything to you about that?
No, I don't know that he cared for it. You know, Michael didn't like cutting his hair, and to this day, Michael has a skullet. But you know, it gave him a platform, and Michael was at his best because he can talk, he can interview, he can do backstage segments. He has this ability to do that. That's talent. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody's a one-take guy. Michael Hayes is a one-take guy. Doc Hendricks was a vehicle to get Michael Hayes out there, and now he's Michael Hayes, and you know, he'll always be Michael Hayes. There is no other person that exists in that box.
When you look back and watch some of that stuff, I mean, he still put Michael into that character, whether it was pushing merchandise or hosting a Saturday morning or Sunday morning show. I mean, he still put his all just as he did.
Well, you know where the name Doc came from? It's D-O-K. Doc. Docket. Rock and roll. Yes. Explain it to him another time. Docket. And of course, Hendricks, Jimi Hendrix. How simple is that, right? Well,
did he come up with that?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes, he did. Docket and Doc Hendricks. So, I mean, you know, but he has, that's what I'm saying, he has a reason for everything he does. And he can explain it to you, and explain why it will work or why it won't work. And if he doesn't think it'll work, he'll tell you, and he'll tell you why. And he'll come up with something better. And that's, well, of course, that's my opinion. Not everybody thinks it's better, but once again, I have, maybe I'm biased. Okay, I'm biased. I like Michael Hayes, and we haven't always got along. We haven't always seen eye to eye on something. But at the end of the day, I have to look at it as he knows what he's talking about.
Were you with WWE when the infamous plane ride from hell took place?
Yes, I was.
Were you on the plane?
No, I was.
Are you glad or sad?
I'm glad because I may very well have been implicated as well.
Because you mentioned Michael's hair.
Yes.
And
Oh, you're talking about that plane right now. Wait a minute. I think I was, because on that same ride, Savio, yes, I think on that same ride.
Now, this was, Savio wouldn't have been there. This is, unless Michael got his haircut twice on the plane. This was the same time that Brock Lesnar and Kurt Hennig had a wrestling match.
Kurt Angle.
Kurt Hennig. Because he got released right after that. They almost went out they almost hit the door.
No, it wasn't
fell
that
out.
one. No, it wasn't that one. You're right. No, there was a couple plane rides from hell. I'm
We'll
sorry.
We'll talk about the others later.
Wow. No, it wasn't on that one.
But Michael's hair unfortunately fell victim to scissors.
Yeah.
And the legend claims that the hair made an appearance the next day at TV, taped to the wall.
Possibility, yes. I was there for that. I think I was training in Stanford on those guys.
So, as someone who was close to Michael and knew how much his hair meant to him, how tragic was that?
Michael was very upset. Very upset. But yeah, about the Kurt Hennig and Brock thing was pretty stiff.
Flair had his robe on.
Yeah, with nothing else.
One of the other personal favorites, not to get too sidetracked, but it's too good to not mention. Dustin Runnels serenaded Terry on the microphone,
Yeah.
sang to her.
Yeah.
They had not been together in quite some time.
Mm-hmm. See, yeah, that was a time when I think alcohol was served, and they spent some time on the runway, and
Yes.
alcohol was being served while they were on the runway.
Yes.
So as you got in the air, I don't know if it was just alcohol,
Oxygen deprivation.
but there were things that happened. Yeah, no, I wasn't on that flight. I was on.
Did Michael talk to you about it?
No,
Okay.
no. Other people did, and they explained how mad he was when he got off the plane. And then the next day at TV, again, I was in Stanford during that time, and I was training people. I had the office in Stanford, so I wasn't on the road, but it was certainly something people talked about.
It was later revealed that Sean Waltman was the one that
yeah, Sean doesn't shy away from that either. He says that he was the only one with the sack to do it, and I don't doubt that, man. I mean, look, because it took some balls to go up and cut Michael's hair, but at the same time, what are you going to do?
I had to mention that.
Yeah.
Talking about Terry Gordy's son, Ray Gordy, actually
Training, yeah.
was training and
Deep South
was there, right?
Yeah, when I went to Deep South the first time, Ray was there, and he was a great worker. Like he knew how to work. Let me say that he did. But again, peeling back the layers of the business, and what happens sometimes is you have big footsteps to follow.
Right.
And Ray was not as big as Terry, but he still had the love and passion for the business. It was just something that the people and the powers that be gave him an opportunity to be a hillbilly. What was his name with Festus? Festus and Ray. Let's just call him Ray. How about that? But, that wasn't Ray. So
That might be part of the problem that we don't even remember what they call it.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't Ray. It was Ray portraying something that the office said, here's what we'll do to get you on the roster.
Right.
It wasn't Festus either. It wasn't Doc Gallows. It was Drew Hankinson trying to play something
right.
that the office said, here's an opportunity. But Ray was a guy who was trying to find who he was, and every time he did something, you come back and again, one of the powers that be in Deep South would always, instead of talking about the positive things, it was always the negative things. Well, how about, let's talk about the negative things, but then let's reinforce the positive
right.
things that you did right.
Right.
But that never happened. It was always like, you did nothing right, everything was wrong. Well, not all the time. And if you do everything wrong, how about let's correct that, which I did make an attempt to do. Just right out in the open. And other people didn't really care too much, so they're going to make you a hillbilly or I don't even know if it was a hillbilly, it was just an overall wearing whatever it was.
I'm just going to kind of stir the pot a little bit.
Why not?
And put this out there and react to it how you want. But wouldn't you think that Michael would have been an advocate for Terry Gordy's son? Was he?
I believe he was, but at the same time, you can't have just one blocker.
Sure.
You need to have a line or at least 2 or 3 going for you, or you need to have the guy who has some influence. And while Michael might have had influence, you have to look at it like this. How does it look for Michael Hayes, whose best friend's son, he's advocating for? His best friend's son's maybe 5'8", 5'9", not a monster, and he's still green. Well, he has potential.
Right.
There's only so much money you can do. Sometimes it's not as advantageous to have someone in your corner because they're going to make you work that much harder just to prove
right.
that they're right and he's not. So it's a very political climate. It's a very political animal. Not that that's every reason in the world, but let's just throw it out there. It's a real world when you talk about the political climate, right? The political landscape.
Do you, just finishing up on Ray, do you think, because you mentioned it was a character that they suggested you do, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. But do you think you would have thrived that with another opportunity?
See, I don't know because once again, you can be disillusioned once you get to the big show. Once you get to WWE, you can get in that locker room, get in that environment, and then all of a sudden you find out this isn't what I thought it was. And be careful what you wish for because you want to get there. You want to get there, man. Just let me get there. Let me get there. And you get there and you go, oh wait a minute, it's not what I thought it was. So I don't know how much his enthusiasm or excitement would have lasted because when they talk about the Shark Tank, they're not kidding. It's a Shark Tank, and you have no friends.
Getting there is one thing. Staying there is
Staying there and getting a spot, taking a spot, earning your spot, living that spot.
not your dog spot, not your liver spot.
Uh,
I said not your dog spot, not your liver spot. The spot.
Yes, that's very good. Very good. Thank you. No, I don't use that. No, that is right. Being there, getting there is one thing, but staying there and really having to fight because you're going to have to fight every single day. You can't let up. You can't relax, and that's part of the issue. That's why a lot of guys burn out. That's why a lot of guys get bitter and disappointed because they don't want to do what they have to do. Right. I'm just as guilty. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I did it, you should do it too. No, it's not. You don't know what it's like until you get here and you go, holy smoke, man, is it really like this? Yeah, it's really like that.
So just an overall look at the legacy of the Freebirds collectively. Where is their place? And I ask you this a lot, but where is the Freebirds' place in wrestling history?
See, once again, when you talk about different eras, everybody has their favorite. Their favorite world champion, their favorite singles, their favorite tag team, their favorite diva. But the Freebirds, for the modern era, in this era, and I said this to Michael, if the guys, this goes to the girls too, in developmental, don't know who the Freebirds, the fabulous Freebirds were, they need to find out. They need to do their history lesson. They need to find out who came before them. And the fabulous Freebirds were one of the greatest tag teams in history. Not just for the past 35 years, but if you look back on the innovations that they had. We talked about the Freebird rule. We talked about the business they did in Texas and how they popped it. And they did pop it. The Freebirds were a huge part of Texas wrestling. So they have to be considered as one of the greatest teams of all time. And I believe Michael Hayes, Terry Gordy, and Buddy Roberts should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm sure it's just a matter of time, if not at WrestleMania 31.
Well, they're going to be in Texas.
Yes, they've been in Texas before, though. But I do believe this time they should put the Freebirds in the Hall of Fame.
And you might be right, because I know early on Vince said the Hall of Fame existed in his mind, and that's, there was no rhyme or reason, but it's starting to make a little bit more sense.
It is, once you got Bruno in there, once you got Jake, once you put Macho Man in, now it does make sense. You got the guys who really deserve to be in there, right? And the Freebirds deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Well, I think that's a good point to stop talking about the Freebirds. We've talked about urinating on each other, and
hey, it happens. It happens. You better be pissed off and pissed on, they say,
yeah,
but not the Freebird rule, man.
Well, folks, we want to encourage you to visit us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website, theofficevisit.com, our parent website, logansworldtv.com. You can find all kinds of goodies there, including this brand new Office Visit t-shirt featuring Dr. Tom. This may hurt a bit, and as I always say, for some people listening,
whoever drew that is a fantastic artist.
I'm not sure who did that. Somebody in our art
Van Gogh.
It might have been Van Gogh. Yeah. We also have Tom's book for sale, Pro Wrestling Curriculum, Advice, Suggestions, and Stories to help the aspiring pro get to the next level. You can digitally download the Office Visit on the website as well as order it on DVDs. Season 2, just getting started, Tom. The best is yet to come. Folks, again, from Dr. Tom Pritchard, I'm your host, Matt McCormick. This has been the Office Visit, and we will see you next time.